Good morning, all you real estate gamers out there. Today, I'm going to be telling you about the main differences of buying new construction in Vancouver versus Toronto. So since I had the unique experience of personally buying and selling and helping other clients do so in both markets, I'll tell you exactly what you need to know. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, add your comments, hit the alert button. All of this helps the YouTube algorithms and helps this channel greatly, so we really appreciate that. And again, I'm going to be throwing out a lot more content like this so that you can be more informed real estate purchasers, investors, agents, whatever it is you are. So without further ado, let's get started on the video. Before I get started, just wanted to give a shout out to Jessica Chen at West Coast Living Real Estate Group in Vancouver. She's with Oaken Realty. She actually brought me up to speed on the Vancouver market. We actually used to work in the same office about 20 years ago when I first got started in the business. So anytime I get a client looking in Vancouver, I send her to her because I know that they're going to get high quality service with experience. So if you're looking to buy something in Vancouver, definitely check her out. I'll leave the information in the description below. All right, let's dig into this. So things to note, first of all, this can apply not to just Vancouver and Toronto, but East and West Coast. I know pretty much all of Ontario follows the same rules as Toronto does, and in Vancouver, in Calgary, I think Edmonton, they are very similar as well. Number two, this applies to most developments, not all. There are some developers here that do things differently, so they're all different. So just there are some exceptions, so just keep that in mind. This applies primarily to Canadian residences. And this is not legal or tax advice, so go consult your professionals if you have any information in regards to taxes or legal stuff. Okay, so we're going to go over the initial contract and deposits, two, assignments, occupancy, taxes, and then closing costs. So number one, initial contract and deposit. In Vancouver, you have a 7-day rescission period. In Toronto, you have a 10-day rescission period. Those who don't know about rescission periods, basically you can get out of the contract with no strings attached within this time period. Okay, lawyer review is uncommon actually in Vancouver. So she was telling me that they don't really send it to a lawyer to review the contracts. In Toronto, we always send contract to the lawyers for a review. So that's something different. Typically, Vancouver pays 5% of the price on signing, which is quite high compared to Toronto. Toronto, we pay $5,000 usually. Some projects will make you pay $10,000. Some projects more, but majority of the stuff is $5,000 in Toronto. And they actually make you pay 20% deposit within a year. So they have a really aggressive deposit structure. In Toronto, they have a more lenient deposit structure. There's 15% deposit within usually like a year and a half to 2 years, and they stagger it out. I've even seen like $1,000 a month type of deposit structures, and then usually pay the final 5% on occupancy. Vancouver, you're actually paying a lot more deposit in a shorter period of time. Number two, assignments. So difference between Vancouver and Toronto and assignments. So in Vancouver, there's typically an assignment fee charged by the developer of 2 to 5% of the assignment price. So that's quite a hefty charge. In Toronto, we typically don't have an assignment fee, but the developers usually charge you the lawyer fee, which is about $1,000, under $1,000 typically. Approximately 50% of the developers will not allow you to assign, whereas in Toronto, most of the developers do allow you to assign as long as you're within the time period that they're allowing the assignments to happen, and that they're pretty much sold out of their inventory. Occupancy. So the differences between Vancouver and Toronto occupancy. So the move-in date in Vancouver is actually a final closing date, whereas in Toronto, the move-in date is not the final closing date. It's the interim occupancy period. There are exceptions for this. There is some developers that actually follow the Vancouver style, where the actual closing date, actual move-in date, is the final closing date. So just keep that in mind. As I mentioned earlier, there are some exceptions. Vancouver, when you move into your property, you have minor deficiencies. In Toronto, you can have some major deficiencies. I've seen clients move into the properties with like no cabinet doors, like all the kick plates are missing, like things pretty much like half done. I don't know why they do it like this here in Toronto. Actually, I do know why. It's all about money. But at the end of the day, I really don't think it should be allowed. It's so inefficient. Here, you're pretty much sometimes moving into like a construction zone, and then you're fighting for like the elevator with the tradespeople. and it's really, really dusty, dirty, inconvenient for the tradespeople. Sometimes I see the tradespeople just waiting on the hallway just to get on the elevator because there's so many people going up and down the elevators. It's completely ridiculous. Anyways, that's the way it's done in Toronto, so that's something that you need to be aware of. In Vancouver, there's no interim occupancy fee. I touched on this. In Toronto, there is an interim occupancy fee. So Vancouver's people don't know what an interim occupancy fee is. I'll explain all that stuff later. In Vancouver, it's a very easy process to close. I've closed on a few new construction condos before. Super easy. Get the keys, get my mortgage, everything's done, and get the title, and there's pretty much nothing much to do. Just move in. But in Vancouver, it can be a very difficult and stressful and frustrating process, especially if you have a lot of deficiencies, or if they keep delaying the unit and you have to move in but you can't. So interim occupancy fees. This is a screenshot of one of my closings recently and how the interim occupancy is broken down. So the 1386.08 is the actual interim occupancy fee. So basically it consists of the interest on deferred monies. It's also known as a phantom mortgage, occupancy fee, builder's rent, etc. Common expenses, also known as condo fees, maintenance fees, and strata fees in Vancouver. Real estate taxes is also known as property taxes or realty taxes. Now, how do you calculate the different fees? So I'm going to show you how to calculate the interest on deferred purchase. Basically, it's the remaining balance owing to the builder, typically, which is about 80% left of the purchase price, and you multiply that by the 1-year Bank of Canada conventional mortgage rate. So, and then you divide it by 12 to get the actual monthly amount. Common expenses, you calculate by based on the annual budget, and you multiply it by the unit allocation percentage of the unit, including the locker and the parking. I'll show you an example of that after as well. And then you divide the number by 12, and then you get your monthly cost. Real estate taxes is typically calculated as 1% of the purchase price. It really depends on the builder and how they want to charge this. And then you divide that number by 12. Interest on deferred purchase example. So I'm going to show you an example, like I said, of a condo that I just recently closed on. So I bought it for $337,252.50. I paid a $50,587.89 deposit, so I was left with $269,802, and then my interim occupancy for that portion is $629.29. So then we'll actually do the calculation. My interim occupancy date was August 17th, 2021, and the bank year 1-year conventional rate at that date was 2.79%. So this is the math. And basically, if you do it, it works out to this number. So the Bank of Canada 1-year conventional mortgage rate, this was mentioned actually in my statement of adjustments in this section here. You can see that it's highlighted over here. And then of course I had to verify it. So I actually went to the Bank of Canada website and downloaded their spreadsheet and then verified that that was a correct interest rate at that time. Common expenses. So I'm just going to show you an example of how to calculate this. So this unit here, I'm just highlighting as 346.78. So the percentage contribution to common expenses is highlighted here. You can find this information on your disclosure statement. And then this is the common expense fee. So if you actually do the math, it works out to this number. So why was the number different from the one that was on my interim statement of adjustments? Because actually the amount can change from purchase to closing. Because of inflation, things get more expensive, so the final budget might be higher than what was quoted initially when you first purchased a property. So that's why mine was actually different. So I'm just going to quickly touch on real estate taxes and show you how that calculation was done. So the purchase price was $337,252.50, and then the realty taxes on my interim statement was $281.04. So again, 1% divided by 12, and you get that number. So interim occupancy fees is, in summary, you add the three components together that I just calculated, and then you get the $1386.08, which is the fees that I pay every month until I get my final registration. And then you actually pay by post-dated checks made payable to the developer. So most of the time they just ask you for 12 post-dated checks, and they just deposit them automatically before your interim occupancy closing. And again, if your final closing is actually delayed even further, they will ask for more checks for you to bring to their office. And I've done that many times before. Some of my properties have been in interim occupancy for over 2 years. Some of them there is no interim occupancy. Some of them you're waiting for over 2 years. So just keep that in mind when you're buying new construction here. Let's talk about taxes now. Vancouver is only charging GST, whereas in Toronto they charge HST, which is GST plus the provincial tax, 13%. The taxes are not included in your purchase price in Vancouver. In Toronto, it is included in your purchase price, assuming you're going to be owner-occupier. Talk about that later. In Vancouver, the property transfer tax, PTT, is the same thing as the land transfer tax in Toronto. They just call it different things, okay? And also in Vancouver, there's a BC speculation and vacancy tax, which can be 0.5% if you're a resident or citizen, or 2% if you're a foreigner or satellite family. And there's also a Vancouver empty home tax, which is 5% now. They just increased it this year. I think it's still 3%, but I think it's going to kick in next year or something like that. So just check that out. Don't quote me on it. So Tim, can you go over each one of the taxes and breakdowns and how to calculate everything for me? I thought you'd never ask. So Vancouver GST, so how does that work? So it's basically 5% of the purchase price and you pay it on the final closing, okay? And then basically you can get a GST rebate, which is 36% of 5%, which is basically 1.8%. But it's on a sliding scale and it maxes out at $350,000 purchase price. So the max you can get is actually $6,300. But then it depreciates on a straight line to zero up to $450,000. So basically what that means is anything above $450,000, you're not going to get any rebate. So don't even bother thinking about this, okay? So now let's talk about the Toronto HST. It's 13% included in the purchase price, assuming that you're going to be an owner-occupier. So if you're not an owner-occupier, you're going to have to pay the rebate portion back to the government, okay? And I'll show you how that works. So basically, we talked about earlier that GST rebate is 35%, 5%, which is the 1.8%. And then how that works, the same thing, it works the same way in Ontario. But there's also an HST component, which is basically 75% of 8%, which is 6%. So it maxes out actually at $400,000 because the max HST rebate portion you can be able to claim is $24,000. So even though you're buying $1 million place, it's going to be $24,000. It maxes out once you hit that $400,000 threshold. But again, we talked about the GST, how it goes to zero at $450,000. I'll come back to that later. What you're going to have to do if you're an investor, a qualified investor, is you're going to have to apply to get this money back from the government. So after your closing, you pay your HST. You're gonna have to fill out all this application. Make sure you send your 1-year lease that you have proof that you're renting out the property, and a couple of other forms, and send it over to the government, and they'll give you back your money probably within 3 to 4 months. I actually have a video on how to make the application and do this entire process manually and through online. I'll put the links to these videos below. So basically what you need to know is anything above $450,000 net purchase price, you're gonna have to pay about $24,000, which is the HST rebate portion, which you're gonna apply to get back. So now let's talk about the Vancouver property transfer tax, or the land transfer tax that we like to call it in Toronto. So the formula is based on the fair market value of the property on the date of registration. So not the price, the fair market value, based on their website. So it's basically 1% of the first $200,000 and 2% from $200,000 to $2 million, and then 3% above $2 million. And there's an additional 2% that is charged if your price is above $3 million. There is also a new construction exemption if your price is under $750,000. And then you also get a partial exemption if it's from $750,000 to $800,000. It's similar to the GST where it's on a sliding scale, where it goes to zero at $800,000. So an example of how much it's going to cost you for $1 million property for the PPT, it's about $18,000 you're going to have to pay for your property transfer tax. In Toronto, we have the land transfer tax. So the Toronto formula is based on the actual purchase price. So that's different. So 1% on the first $55,000, from $55,000 to $250,000, it's 2%. 3% from $250,000 to $400,000, and then for 4% from $400,000 to $2 million, and then 5% over $2 million. So outside of Toronto area, this Toronto City area, all you have to do is divide this number by 2 because the tax is less outside of the Toronto City area. because in Toronto we actually have two land transfer tax, the municipal and the provincial. Outside of Toronto is just the provincial. And there's also a first-time homebuyer rebate, which is maxed out at $8,475 if you're in Toronto, and outside Toronto it's $4,000. So for an example, if say $1 million purchase, you're going to be paying $32,950 of taxes here in Toronto, compared to, I think it was $18,000 in Vancouver, which is almost double the amount of taxes that you have to pay. So let's quickly touch on Vancouver's BC speculation and vacancy tax, and also the empty home tax. So the BC speculation and vacancy tax only applies to certain regions of BC, okay? And it's 0.5% for Canadian residents or citizens, and it's 2% for foreigners and satellite families. It is based on the assessed value. So then for a resident, you're going to be doing the assessed value times 0.5%, and it's payable every single year. So this is not like a one-time fee. You pay this every single year. You have to apply, and show the government that you are still living in the property and that you're not a foreigner or a satellite family. So the Vancouver empty home tax, on the other hand, is only applicable to Vancouver, and it's the assessed value multiplied by 5%, which is huge. It's 3% now, but it is going up to 5%, and it's payable again every single year. An example is, let's just say you have a $1 million assessed value in Vancouver and you're a Canadian citizen, so you're going to be paying $5,000, the BC speculation and vacancy tax portion, plus another $50,000, so $55,000 per year you're going to be having to pay if you leave your property vacant and empty. And there's all these guidelines and criteria. Again, I'm going to put the link to the government website below so you can actually take a look at the details if you want to. Number 5, we're going to finally talk about the closing costs, so the difference between Vancouver. So again, we talked about GST, and you're going to have to pay the GST in Vancouver. In Toronto, you're going to have to pay the HST rebate portion if you're not an owner-occupier. If you are an owner-occupier, you don't have to worry about this HST rebate portion at all because it's already been deducted from your purchase price. There's no development charges in Vancouver. So this is something different that we never talked about. In Toronto, there are lots of development charges, and I'm going to actually go over an example of my closing to show you exactly what those charges can be. They have lower lawyer fees. You're going to typically pay only about $1,500 to close in Vancouver. In Toronto, we have a lot higher lawyer fees, again by $1,000. It can get higher, which includes disbursements and all that. But typically you're going to be under $2,500. And they have a lower land transfer tax, as we discussed earlier. We have a much higher land transfer tax, pretty much double of what they're paying in Vancouver. So now let's quickly touch on the Toronto development charges, because this is a big topic. So what this is cost passed on to the buyer by the developer. So the city charges the developer, hydro company, utility companies, they charge the developer all these fees, and they actually pass all these fees on to the buyer. Some of the fees are ridiculous that they pass on, but anyways, that's the way it's done here, and it's typically capped. So the developers will typically put a cap on the development charges that won't go above a certain value, but just keep in mind that not all items are capped. So just because they cap it at $10,000 doesn't mean your development closing charges are going to be $10,000. You need to look at what they're capping and kind of estimate what is going to be above that. And just to note, you're never going to know exactly what this amount is going to be, because the developer will never tell you, because they don't even know. It all comes out at the very end. So you're going to have to kind of like estimate, and talk to somebody who actually has experience doing this to give you like a more accurate ballpark figure. So this is just to give you an example of one of the pages on my statement of adjustments. And you can see here, like these are like some of the development charges, okay? And then I had a cap at $10,900. So then my total development charge only came out to like $12,317. But you see this section here, the Section 37 agreement charges. This is something that was not capped. So then I had to pay this on top of the $12,317. So as you can see, things start to add up. And then here's some more costs that I had to pay. The reserve fund, common elements, starting fee. I had to pay the carry-on warranty cost, the heat pump interest, registration fee, admin fees, all of these different fees I had to actually pay in addition to this. I had to pay an amendment fee. If you amend the contract, just a note, in Toronto, they're going to typically charge you for this if you do it after the 10-day cool-off period. So just understand that there's actually no free lunch in Toronto with the developers, and God forbid that you're delaying your closing, they'll charge you up the yin-yang. So now that you know the difference between Toronto and Vancouver, what do you think? Did I actually get that right, where the Vancouver PTT is actually based on the market value and not the purchase price? Does the government actually enforce that? I'd love to know. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the channel, hit the notification button, hit the like button, leave your comments below. This all helps the algorithm and helps this channel grow. Would love to hear your feedback and would love to know your thoughts on what kind of information that I can provide you to help you guys become better real estate agents, investors, buyers, whatever it is that you want to do. And if you haven't done so already, get into the real estate game, because it's the best thing you can do for your life if done right. I'll see you in the next video.